Hi everyone, it's Adam with Milo's Restoration, and today I've got a project for you about making a table out of two doors that a client brought me from their new, I guess it's new to them, but it's actually a mid-century house. And these are the doors they had, and they wanted to make a table out of them. So I got started ripping down the rough table to size, but first I had to chalk some lines and send them to the client so they could see it and get an idea for what they were going to save out of the table. But it is a stave core door, so we do have limitations with where we can cut and what we can cut. So I tried to get it to where I was on two solid staves, if that makes any sense. I didn't want like a little quarter-inch piece of a stave being where the glue joint was going to go. So I did that as best as I could to get on two solid staves and keep the figure as good looking as I could. It was kind of hard to do, but I think I was able to salvage the best pieces of the door for the glue up. So I used that old piece of the door to set up like a test for the domino, and I put some big 14 by 100 millimeter dominoes in the glue joint, and I tried to get them in a solid stave to kind of help this door secure itself in the glue joint long term. For something like this, I'm just going to glue in the mortises tight, and I'll just glue in the mortises on one side, and then on the other side I'll just do it at the same time that I glue up the whole table. But yeah, I mean, you need to test fit it. I actually kind of maybe more move the mortiser over a tad bit just to make a little bit of slop in it to where it's easier to test fit, but I don't like using the loose setting on the mortiser. It just never seems to work out well for me. It's always too big of a mortise. So I usually let the initial glue joint set for about 3 to 4 hours, try to go get lunch or do something like that, and then I'll usually just move it out of the way, like, and place it like vertically, if that makes any sense. And but the next day I'll come back, and that's when I'll start to do whatever I need to do. I always let it sit overnight, and I started by cleaning it, and sanding it down with 320, and the finish came off really easily, so it wasn't really a problem. Okay, so now I'm going to start milling up the lumber for the base. I'm not going to show all the steps in the milling process, but it's a lot of rough cut on a table saw, rough cut on a miter saw, go back to the table saw after I've done the joiner and the planer to get my final dimension. And sometimes I'll have to do that process a couple times, just depends on how bad the lumber is in its starting state, and this lumber was pretty crooked. I try to buy everything as 4S, but sometimes it's just not available. So a common criticism of this might be that, hey, that walnut that you have looks a lot different than the walnut in this table. Well, yeah, this is probably, I have kiln dried walnut, and I'm sure that this is probably either, it could be kiln dried, but more than likely it's probably like some kind of like solar dried walnut veneer. And it has a little bit of a different look to it, but it's the closest that you can get that I know of. Now, since we're going to be staining it, it's going to bring it to a closer, more consistent color. But if you were trying to go with the original finish color, then you might want to use some kind of toner to bring it back. But you can't really tone the walnut that I have to make it a lighter color per se. It would be easier to bring the original finish to a darker color. So a lot of the times people don't glue breadboards in. And what I do for mine is I cut the outer mortises really loose and I glue one of the pins, and I do glue them. But this is also a stave core door. So stave core doors are made to prevent uh, wood movement just by their creation. Obviously, if you have a door and it moves every year, then you'd have to reset it every year and it wouldn't work. So the movement is not going to be like a solid wood tabletop would be. So that's just something that you have to take into consideration, that if you're doing a solid wood tabletop, you're probably going to have to do this a little bit differently. So while I do glue the mortises in, I don't really glue the edges in. I just leave a gap in between that, and I just try to get everything as level as I can. So now I'm just cutting down the members for the base. It's going to be a trestle base with kind of a V shape outside two pieces, and that's what I'm cutting. Well, that's what I'm marking now. And then it'll have a pretty solid member in the middle as like the main trestle. If I could make any change on this table, this probably would have been where I would have made it. I think that instead of using tight mortises, I would have used two tight mortises for the middle pieces and two on the top and bottom, so four total, and then use loose mortises on the outer trestle pieces because it was a very, very difficult glue up. Okay, so that gives us two bases, and I checked everything twice. And like I said, if I could do this again on these little pieces, I would have used a bigger mortise and just allowed a little bit more movement in it. It really doesn't affect the strength at all. And this was the second trestle base. I just try to clean everything up as good as I can with a wet rag. It just kind of helps to cut down on the amount of glue cleanup you have. I cut all the pieces down to their rough size. I mean, well, this is actually going to be their finished size. And then I'm going to taper them later with a jigsaw. But this is a really sketchy cut, and if you don't feel comfortable making this, please don't do it. So I'm actually milling down the middle stretcher right here. I just use pocket holes for these top two kind of stretchers that are gonna attach the tabletop as Z-clips. It doesn't really, it's not visible, so. So I'm gonna put screws that way that I can easily remove and kind of disassemble this base for transportation. And I used a Forstner bit to drill holes for where the screws would sit, and then I'm gonna put like a decorative plug over it and just not glue it in. So after I cut the tapers and got the stretcher installed, I just filled all the little areas that were kind of dinged and nicked and stuff like that, and some obviously those screw holes from where the door was attached to the wall at. So now it's back to finishing, and I'm just going to be using a stain on this and then a top coat. So I decided that since I had already sanded it with 320, I went back and hand sanded it with 240, then again with 320 after I wet the grain down and raised it, because since I'm going to be using a water-based finish, you do need to raise the grain. So this is General Finishes, and it's going to be mahogany, brown mahogany. That's the color. And I just try to wipe it on, and I use a full strength product and just try to push it around as good as you can to get rid of any of the wiping marks. It's way less visible on the base than it is in the tabletop. On the tabletop, you'll see that I have to pour a little bit of distilled water onto a rag and kind of push it around to make the color look a lot more consistent, because it's a lot harder to stain a very large surface like that and not have any wiping marks, because you can't really just stop in the middle whenever you're pushing the stain across. Okay, and here's the tabletop. Normally I don't speed clips up, but had to speed this one up, and I kind of wanted to get the whole video of me doing it. But yeah, I just tried to work as fast as I could, and I just got stain on everything, and then I came back with a bottle of distilled water and a microfiber, and I just pushed everything around to try to get the color really consistent and get rid of everything. It looks like a mess at first, but it gets better the more that you continually push it and kind of get rid of the excess. And yeah, I mean, that's just the only process that I've found that works good for this kind of thing. Um, like I said, if you want to spray a toner or something like that, that's your prerogative. But I don't know. I haven't found any toners that I really like recently. I'd like to try some of the Renner products maybe. But as far as that goes, I've just had a lot of inconsistencies on a lot of projects where I tried to make a toner with something and they were incompatible for whatever reason with the products or the poly that I was using. And it's just always a mess. So I just use stains now. So this is Centurion's high build filler. I'm going to be using a 1K top coat, and I just use this filler because it's a little bit thicker, using a 1.8 on my Fuji. And yeah, if you're having problems with the Fuji leaking, I found a little bit of a solution. I use a pair of channel locks to tighten the top, and it seems to keep it from leaking. and I sped this way up. But yeah, so I just sanded everything with a super fine 2 times. So this is the top coat. It's Centurion's 1K in satin. And I'm spraying it with a 1.8. It's a little bit thinner. It's easier to spray than the filler. So this is kind of really where it matters at when you're spraying. You just try to keep the dry spray down, and also at the same time trying to avoid putting too much on it. I just try to make sure that I get rid of all those dry spots, and they kind of sometimes will show up as sheen variations, but I did 3 coats, and at the end of it, I was happy with it. You're never going to get it 100% perfect. I mean, maybe you will, but I don't know. I've never been able to on extremely large tabletops, not with an HVLP turbine. Maybe with like an airless or an air-assisted airless, it'd be a little bit easier, but I just try to do what I can to make sure that there's no dry areas and just go for it. Also, definitely want to make sure that you don't have too much air coming in. That can make dry spray. But with satin finishes, it's a little bit harder because it's a little bit duller in my opinion. I don't know why, but the semi-gloss doesn't give me the same amount of problems. Okay, so for attaching the tabletop, this is actually not what I'm going to use, but I just wanted to kind of show you so you could get an idea. I have a cheap Harbor Freight biscuit joiner, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut slots in there, and I'm going to use those slots to attach these Z-clips. But these are not actually the Z-clips that I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using some that are different. So, like I said, I'm just really showing this so you can get an idea of how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to change some things about it. The Z-clips that I have ordered look a lot different than this, and they're a lot more sturdy, but I'll also put some on the trestle in addition to just those little stretchers. So this was the finished table, and I sent some pictures to the client. They were really happy with it, and I love the way it turned out too. It's definitely been a good use to salvage these doors that came out of this house. The client renovated the house, and they were really happy to be able to use these old doors for something in their home.